So without further ado, I am delighted to pass the virtual stage to Alexandra Day, one of our founding board members, who will be enchanting us with tonight's entertainment. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Alex Day, and this is a song that I wrote uh, while I was working with the Incarnation Institute for Sex and Faith. I work with a lot of kids in my day to day music stuff, and I decided to sneak in a body positive, quasi religious song so I can get kids to sing that. So here we go. I am made in the image of love. 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 You are 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 made in the image of love. These hands and these feet, these elbows and these knees, these fingers and these thumbs, I am made in the image of love. Sing it with me now. We are made in the image of love. 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 Tag ending. We are made in the image of love. One more time. We are made in the image of love. Congrats, Dale.
Thank you, Alex, for that beautiful and original song crafted expressly for the Incarnation Institute for Sex and Faith. Now we are honored to present testimonials from some of our esteemed trainees. Our first testimonial comes from Rachel Keller, who has been privileged to know Rev Bev for over a decade. Rachel's journey with Rev Bev began as a student and an admirer, evolved into a role on the board, and it blossomed into a cherished friendship. Hailing from Baltimore, Maryland, Rachel is a dedicated sex and couples therapist, as well as a certified IISF, Incarnation Institute for Sex and Faith educator. Let's hear from Rachel as she shares her insights and experiences. Rachel.
Hi, everyone, and congratulations, Dale. I know Dale as a mentor, co-author of our book, Advancing Sexual Health for the Christian Client, colleague through serving on the IISF board and completing the IISF Sex and Faith training, and of course, a friend. Dale is the person most responsible for my journey from sexual shame into sexual empowerment, joy, and health. Her vision, dedication, and strength gave me the courage to explore something different than the sex negative messaging I was taught, plus a clear path to follow. I have no doubt Dale has impacted countless others in similarly significant ways. Through her trailblazing work with IISF, her service in the church and as campus minister, her multiple creative projects over the years, and the impact she makes simply from her bold and caring presence in the lives of everyone she knows. Dale, thank you for your tireless efforts. It's my pleasure to be a part of this tribute as we honor your far-reaching legacy and influence through IISF. I imagine I can speak for all of us when I say that we're excited to see what you do next as you continue this invaluable work.
Thank you, Rachel. It is my pleasure to introduce Krista Rexrod-Wolf, a distinguished trainee and our newest addition to the board. Krista is ordained in the United Methodist Church and is currently pursuing an MA in counseling. Her professional journey includes meaningful contributions to a research-driven public policy nonprofit. In addition to her role with Incarnation Institute for Sex and Faith, Krista serves as the Director of Operations for the West Virginia Faith Coalition, a progressive advocacy movement in her home state of West Virginia. Please join me in welcoming Krista as she brings her unique perspective and expertise. Krista.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. And again, congratulations to Dale. I wanted to share a little bit about my story so that you would have an idea of the kind of impact that IISF has had. I matriculated through level 1 in February, and I took level 2 from June to August. And unlike a lot of folks who encounter this work, my parents and my childhood minister were body positive, and I was exposed to scientifically accurate sex education at home and at church. So I was surprised to enter level 1 and realize that a lot of my classmates in the program were carrying trauma that I did not have. Despite my social location in rural Appalachia, which would have been ripe for the abuses of purity culture, my parents were against purity culture, and I grew up in a United Methodist congregation where a vibrant, educated, lovely woman in her 30s was the minister. And it was not until I took this course and met Dale and the other folks on the board that I realized what a rare and precious gift I had in my upbringing. I had not been outspoken in any particular way about sexual diversity or pleasure because they were so natural to my life. I didn't know that I needed to do that as a minister. And so this class and this organization provoked me to be more intentional about the things I knew, and it gave me new language with which to do that. So personally, since beginning level 1 in February, I'm going to share a couple of personal ways this has impacted me, and then a quick ripple effect story. And the first is that not long after beginning level 1 in February, I came out as bisexual to my husband, which was an exhale I didn't know I was waiting for. I also ceased working for a homophobic denomination, and I entered a master's program, which Angela mentioned, in mental health counseling to position myself for work and advocacy in religious trauma and sexual freedom. And I started an online an online Christian small group that meets for education and support and advocacy. That group was my level 2 project, and it actually launched in September. All the members of that group are rural Appalachians who are raising transgender or gender non-binary young people, and they all thought they were alone. The rest of that is a story for another day. But I wanted to share too, just about the ripple effect that has. So it has personally impacted me, but also I'm speaking and getting to know people in new ways because of the course. I'm in a research course this semester, and my research is exploring effective interventions for queer people who have religious trauma. And I had to give a presentation on my research project in which I talked about advancing sexual health for the Christian client. And I talked about level 1 and level 2 as they sort of inform my research question. And during my presentation, I got a private message from a classmate that said, I would love to learn more about the organization you're talking about. My boyfriend and I are queer. He has religious trauma. His ex is transgender and also has religious trauma. They have 2 girls. My boyfriend and I want to make sure we limit the potential for religious trauma as much as possible, but it's hard in the mountains. Thank you so much. After some conversation, we figured out we lived in adjoining towns, and I met Olivia and her boyfriend, and I've been giving them curriculum for their kids. They're being introduced to a God Olivia knew existed, but didn't have any context to describe. And the thing is, this sort of thing keeps happening. I even asked Dale if I could make cards that say, Krista Rexford Wolf, IISF evangelist, and she has agreed to allow me to do that. But in trying to distill the stories for this evening, I kept thinking of new examples, and I collected a few that I can't say because of time. So I put them in a document. I'm going to put the document in the chat, and if anyone wants to see all the ways that I've been collecting stories about how IISF keeps popping up in my life, you can read that document. But it is all to say that IISF is a movement, and it's delivering on its mission. I'm so grateful for it. Thanks, Dale.
Thank you, Krista. And before I forget, I do want to mention that the opening music was featuring the artistry of Colors in Motion. That's www.colorsinmotion by Linda DeHart. And Linda's web address is www.dehartart.com. And someone has put that in the chat for me. So thank you. So now I am delighted to introduce Dr. David Ahmad Stout, a distinguished trainee also of IISF. David is actively involved in various professional affiliations, including the American Psychological Association, with memberships in Division 39, which is psychoanalysis, 44, LGBT, 45, ethnic minority, and 51, men and masculinities. He is also associated with the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Colors, and Therapists, or ASECT. He's part of the Pennsylvania Psychological Association and the Philadelphia Society for the Psychoanalytic Psychology. Join me in welcoming David as he shares his valuable insights and experiences as a trainee. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I've admired Dale's work from afar for a number of years, since my days as a grad student at Widener. But it's only in the last year or so I've had the opportunity to learn directly from her and from the community she's created with the Incarnation Institute, going through levels in one and two so far. During the course of my life, I've had a foot in two worlds. In college, I fell in with a group of Christians who thought that God was probably cool with gay people and cared about social justice, and ultimately became what we believe is the first open and affirming Christian church in Baltimore. In my professional world, I'm a psychologist and sexologist. Whether we're talking about experiences of sexual trauma and marginalization, or the process of understanding and accepting our sexual selves, it's some of the most sensitive and deeply personal kind of work there is. And my worlds never really intersected. They didn't necessarily feel like they conflicted, but they didn't intersect. But even progressive religious spaces have hesitation around aspects of sexuality, and psychology and sexology spaces have a hesitation often around faith. It's only with the Incarnation Institute I could experience both of these parts of me as really belonging in a community. It's the first place where I'm not the weird sex person in the faith spaces or the weird faith person in the sex spaces. I could just be me. I didn't know you could find a group that so thoroughly embraced faith, sexuality, and a willingness to question any and every power structure that harms people. And to see how liberation was so central to being both sexually whole and to our understanding of God. Because of the community that you've created here, Dale, I know that as I step into this work in bigger ways, I'm not alone. I'm both encouraged and supported in the work that I do, and can encourage and support the work of others in this community that I can't do. Along the lines of integrating these worlds, I was also asked to share, Dale asked me to share one of our collective actions in this direction of bringing together religious and health professionals and educational professionals in a petition to lawmakers in defense of trans folks and drag performers. So I'll share a link to that later on after I finish. How can I best summarize the kind of freedom that I've found in this work? To study sex is all too often to study what makes people think it makes them less than because of what they've done, what's been done to them, what they feel or think, or who they are. Because of the community you've created here, Dale, I'm better able to fully embrace all parts of myself and to feel whole. And it's from that place that I can more easily help others to look at the parts of themselves which they've been taught to hate and be ashamed of, and to see how those same parts could be seen by a loving God with whom we can instead celebrate pleasure, diversity, and freedom. Thank you for these gifts of freedom and community, Dale, that you've given to each of us here and to each person that we can then touch with that spirit as we continue this holy work of liberation.
Thank you, David. Now allow me to introduce Onika Henry, a remarkable trainee and facilitator for the Level 1 training. Onika is not only a dedicated clinical sexologist, but also a passionate sex educator and accomplished theater artist in private practice, hailing from Trinidad and Tobago. Her accolades include being a TEDx Port of Spain speaker in 2019, showcasing her commitment to sharing impactful ideas. Onika also holds the distinction of being a 2012 USA Fulbright Scholar, exemplifying her dedication to advancing knowledge and expertise. Beyond her professional pursuits, Onika generously volunteers her time and skills at Tobago's only halfway home for ex-prisoners and deportees, demonstrating a profound commitment to community service and support. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Onika. And if someone can please tell me if Onika is on yet, because she was having problems with electricity on the island. Okay.
I do not see her on at the moment.
Thank you, Cherie. I will read her testimonial she sent to me. I need, in all caps, to stay in contact with this woman. She's transforming lives, exclamation point. Those were my thoughts when I first heard Rev Bev speak at an event at Widener University in 2012 during my first semester in the Master's in Education Human Sexuality program. I was one of many students who chatted with her after her presentations at Widener, so I knew she wouldn't remember me when I contacted her a few years later in 2017 after I returned to my home in Trinidad and Tobago. But I followed her work and kept up to date with the Incarnation Institute's work. I was determined that I must, all caps, have the skills needed to work with Christian communities around sexuality. It was very clear to me that the Christian folks in my part of the world were not, all caps, living their best sex lives. I was hoping that there was an online version of the sex and faith training, but not so at the time. Then 3 years later, COVID-19 hit, and that was a blessing in disguise for me. The training was now available online, and the Institute was giving scholarships. This training has been life-changing for the folks I work with and for me. I would without hesitation describe myself as incompetent and ignorant when it came to knowing the best ways to teach and support Christian communities in achieving sexual wholeness and wellness. I deliberately avoided working with this group. Now I am completely confident. Folks have expressed their deep gratitude for me sharing Rev's source resources and training with them, and this work is so solid that I have been able to apply the core principles of training in non-Christian contexts like Islam. I have absolutely no regrets about doing this. It was an honor, privilege, and blessing to work with Rev. That is from Onika Henry. So thank all of our trainees for their testimonials that were very heartfelt, and it underscores both the imperative for the Institute and the fervor each of you bring to your respective endeavors. So thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists for our enlightening discussion titled Sex and Faith, Where We Are and Where We Are Going. Our first panelist is Reverend Dr. Lisette Cross, affectionately known as Reverend Dr. L. She is a womanist faith leader, facilitator, and professor, driven by a passion to integrate sexuality and faith for healing and liberation. She leads an LGBTQ plus community center and co-hosts the podcast Black Coochie. Dr. Cross is also an avid traveler. Next, we have Reverend Dr. Marvin Ellison, a theological educator dedicated to justice. He co-authored the groundbreaking 1991 Presbyterian study, Keep Body and Soul Together, Sexuality, Spirituality, and Social Justice. His extensive publications include works like Erotic Justice and Making Love Just, Sexual Ethics for Perplexing Times. We welcome Reverend Dr. David Malott, the 7th president of Christian Theological Seminary, who assumed the role in 2019. With a background in teaching diverse subjects from pastoral ministry to queer theology, Dr. Malott is also a spiritual director and retreat leader. Ordained in the United Church of Christ, he shares his life with his husband, Reverend Lance Mullins. Cherie Horton, our next panelist, began as a research intern at the Institute studying sexual health interventions in LGBTQ affirming churches. She now serves on the board, bringing valuable insights to our board. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Tanya Bass, the founder of the North Carolina Sexual Health Conference and president CEO of Optics to Action. As the lead instructor for human sexuality at North Carolina Central University, Dr. Bass also serves as vice president of membership at ASECT. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists. We are eager to engage in a thought-provoking discussion on the intersection of sex and faith with these accomplished individuals. All right. I'm going to give Tara just a minute to make sure she pins everyone. But I would like to start our discussion by noting that this is a far larger topic than can be covered in this short period of time. However, it is important to note where we are. So, can someone tell me if Dr. Bass is on?
I do not see Lisette nor Tanya.
Okay.
Correct.
I know that she sent me a text message that she was in transition. So, all righty. Thank you very much. So we're going to start with Dr. David Malott. So you are in the thick of things as the president of a mainline liberal seminary. What is happening in the world of seminary education right now, and how does body justice play out in the church through that lens, Dr. Malott?
That's a pretty big question. Thank you, Angela. It's a delight to be here. And I guess it's congratulations, Dale. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's always wonderful to celebrate you and your work. And I'm looking forward to your ongoing contributions. So my area, I am not a specialist in sexology or even in the teaching of sexuality. I am a theological educator and an administrator. I've been so for a long time, and I've been involved in theological education for a long time. But I do have an angle kind of on how I see some of the integration, and so I thought I'd just share a few comments. So years ago, I originally was educated. My seminary degree was in a Roman Catholic seminary. I was studied to be a Roman Catholic priest and became a Roman Catholic priest, taught in a Roman Catholic seminary. So I have a lot of Catholic seminary experience. And one of the things that would not surprise anybody probably is that we didn't talk about sexuality very much. The assumption was celibacy was the rule, and therefore there was no need to talk about sexuality. And as a matter of fact, when we would make requests to have either a workshop or some education, the response often was, well, if we start talking about sexuality, then you're going to want to have sex. So we will just not talk about it, and therefore you will not want to have sex. which of course doesn't work that way, as we all know. It certainly didn't stop us or my colleagues from having sex by any means. In 20 years, in the last 20 years, I have been working in Protestant schools, and sexuality, sexism, and heterosexism are a bit more addressed in these contexts. And I think there are more schools who are willing to talk about issues of sexuality and heterosexism and sexism. But I will say that one of the challenges is that most often the topics are willing to be addressed from a very specific viewpoint. In other words, it's often about a kind of justice questions. So making sure that LGBTQ people are respected or included, to make sure that women have a right to be ordained, et cetera. But there's actually very little conversation that goes on around actual sex and sexuality. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted Dale to come to Lancaster, which is where I served previously, to bring her on board to teach our students about sexuality. And one of the things that we talked about was the importance of having not only body positivity, but actually to explain the physicality and mechanics of sex, which Dale can tell you more about, because I wasn't in the classroom, but I heard about it from my students, that they were completely shocked about what they didn't know, which is, again, why we wanted the students to have that kind of experience. So one of the things that's clear to me is that seminary students who don't receive education around their own sexual selves are not only going to be limited as people, but they're also going to be limited in their ability to provide pastoral care, because they're not going to have a fuller understanding of what it means to be human. So I am now the president of Christian Theological Seminary, and we just went through a recent redesign of our MDiv program, in which we now require a class on sexuality, gender, and theology. And the instructions I have given to the dean is it has to be body positive, and it must talk about the actual mechanics of sex. Like, we have to talk about body parts. We have to make sure that our students understand this clearly. And as excited as I am about this, the immediate question is, who's going to teach it? Because there's really nobody on the faculty who have the expertise to be able to teach this in the way that needs to be taught, which sort of demonstrates the challenge that we're living in. There's just not enough people who are willing and able to teach in this direction. But I'm convinced that if we could educate our future clergy and ministers better around this, it would create significant opportunities for people in the congregations and the wider community. And I kind of become even more clear about this recently when I was consulting with a group of pastors in the city of Indianapolis who had called me in because they needed assistance with mental health resources. And this was a community of pastors who admitted that they were often skeptical about mental health resources and therapy, but they were realizing they needed to make this more available to their people. And I said, what changed? What happened that you decided that you needed to bring in mental health resources for the people in your church? And the pastor said, we realized that we needed it for ourselves, that we were experiencing trauma for which we could not process and could not deal with it by ourselves and needed professional help, which all of a sudden turned on a light for us, that we realized that we weren't providing the full range of pastoral care for our people. So we needed to get more mental health professionals in to help us. I think the same thing would be said about sexuality and gender. If the pastors had some opening about the fact that they themselves needed assistance and could be blessed by further study of their sexuality, their own personhood, it would transform the way in which they do ministry and provide pastoral care. So one of the things that I mentioned, we require this class at CTS now in the MDiv program. The other thing that we also do is we have a self-assessment process for every student in the MDiv program. And 3 times in the course of the degree program, they have to answer a questionnaire. And one of the questions that I ask them is, to what extent are they comfortable with their sexuality? And their denominational leaders see this for their response to this question. So I want to make it normal to talk about it. I don't expect students to pour forth everything in this little survey box about their sexuality, but what I want to do is communicate to them that it's okay to talk about it. I want to start asking those questions so that they'll think about it and they'll see that it's connected to their own theological and professional and spiritual development. And even as it makes them uncomfortable, it sort of starts the question, and I hope it sets them up for the course that they're going to be taking. So I'm really grateful to the work that Dale's been doing and the Institute's been doing, because I think we need to get the word out even further. And I think it's slow going with seminaries as they're reducing the number of credits and degree programs. There's less and less space inside MDiv programs, but I think we have to continue to make it a requirement and make it a central part of the education. So I'll stop for now, but thank you for this opportunity.
Well, that was wonderful, Dr. Malott, and thank you for helping us to understand the limitations of being able to provide sex education from the standpoint of your own pastoral care as well as pastoral care for others. I'd like to kind of switch gears right now and go to Cherie, who is a sex educator. So Cherie, could you tell us, what does a good supportive sex ed program? Oh, we have a question. Mr. Moore, would you like to ask a question? Oh, thank you. He's happy about what you said, Dr. David. All right, Cherie. What does a good supportive sex ed program look like in a private religious school setting? And can you share your successes and challenges with us?
Thank you. In order to answer the question, I want to give a little bit of context of the specific private religious school that I work at. I work for a Quaker school in Philadelphia, and Quakers are pretty ahead of the curve as far as religious schools go in terms of specifically the work that we do. So as I answer this question, I am not speaking on behalf of a conservative religion. I'm speaking on behalf of the Quaker school system, which historically has operated in a pretty sex positive way. What it looks like for me is, or what I'll start with, I want you all to think about your school experience in middle school. That's the age that I teach. And I want you to spend maybe 10 seconds thinking about as many just cold, hard facts that you can remember that you were taught in middle school. As I name math class, social studies, maybe you had a health class, maybe you didn't. Science, English. Maybe you can think of the books you read, maybe you can't. And then I want you to think of your middle school or high school experience. What skills did you learn in those classes? And what experiences did you have in middle school? For me, I, of course, teach content, and I hope that some of it sticks. And I teach content that I find to be very important and that I hope that they are able to carry with them. But if they forget what the epididymis is, and if they forget exactly the definition of each framework of a healthy relationship that I teach them, I still think that I did my job if they have the skills needed to look up that information when they need that information. And so, as a health teacher, I view our responsibility as teaching them how to think, not what to think. And that is how, when we're coming up against this culture war on young educators teaching about sexuality and gender, that is how I present that information. I'm interested in teaching children how to think. I am interested in teaching them how to stay safe. And I'm interested in giving them the tools needed to have a good life. That is all that I do. So that is the framework that I have. And I really think a huge part of what I'm seeing the need being is media literacy. So back to the how to think piece. And answering, Angela, your second part of the question, some challenges. We are up against an onslaught of misinformation on gender and sexuality topics that is specifically targeting young people. And I see it in the questions that I get asked by these children. I won't list them because they are upsetting. I'll be very frank, it becomes hard to teach when I am being asked those questions. And I can only imagine the types of things that these kids are being exposed to on a day-to-day basis. And so, of course, in my classes, I'm giving definition. We are talking about like actual concepts and content, and they are learning actual information, but they are also doing their own research. They are constantly, we are constantly having class discussions with each other. I'm constantly poking at their assumptions and trying to get them to process the information that they had from different angles. So that is something I have seen beautiful conversations come from that. And so this issue of media literacy as it relates to gender and sexuality topics are kind of my answer to both my challenges and successes. And I'll stop it there for now.
Thank you, Cherie, and thank you for what you are doing in the lives of these young people. That is admirable and noble. So thank you, and thank you for helping us to think back about our own middle school experiences and what we did not learn. So thank you. Next, we have Dr. Marvin Ellison. So Dr. Ellison, as a retired ethics professor in a seminary setting, what's your assessment of where we are at this moment inside the church and in our culture?
Thanks, Angela, and thank everyone for this wonderful occasion. Any occasion for celebrating our friend and colleague, Bev Dale, is a good occasion. So I'm delighted to be here in the mix. So I'm a kind of big picture guy. So let me sort of draw a large canvas, and then we'll follow up. But you know, when I think about sex and faith and where we are now, one of the things that kept rolling around in my head was Bob Dylan's singing, "The times they are a-changing." And another poet has put it this way: we're living not only in a time of change, but a change of times. The modern world, as we've known it, created over a period of 4 centuries, is literally coming apart at the seams. But the shape of what will follow, what many refer to as the postmodern world, has yet to be determined. So it's no wonder that so many speak of living in the midst of a cultural crisis. This kind of cultural shakeup is good news for some, but not all. On the one hand, many who reside on the what liberation theologians call the underside of history, have organized across the globe to challenge white supremacy and patriarchalism, wealth supremacy. And we can think of the feminist, womanist, mujerista movements, the LGBTQ movement, Black Lives Matter, eco-justice movement, worker rights movement, on and on. Now, while much justice work remains, there's also been considerable movement forward in securing human rights, for creating the conditions for persons to live in dignity and safety within healthy, secure families and communities, movement toward greater care, protection of the earth. But on the other hand, there's been a fierce backlash against these progressive movements. And so in this time of cultural crisis, when so much is in flux, I think we should just expect that some people will panic and become crazy about things like immigration and racialized difference and banning books and controlling how history is written. But what we're also seeing is how moral panic becomes energized, and people get particularly crazy and dangerous when it comes to sex and sexuality. So how grateful I am that Dale and so many others have been spending energy addressing these matters in a way not only to lift up good sex, but to also understand sexual justice as an indispensable component of a comprehensive social justice. So when I think about, where are we now? I think we're struggling inside ourselves and amongst ourselves. I think we're struggling to find our way through a very stressful time of cultural ferment, serious questioning, and in many quarters, deep moral panic. Think white Christian nationalism and how a fearful people will look for scapegoats to blame. Think transgender persons, especially trans people of color. A frightened people will also be more susceptible to manipulation and may willingly give over their power to a strong man who promises to make things safe and secure again. Think the MAGA movement and the rise of white Christian fascism. It's in reaction to progressive social movements and the gains that we and others have contributed to, including the movement towards sexual health and sexual justice. It's in reaction to all this that forces in both church and culture have aligned to try to roll things back and make America great again for the benefit of privileged white Christian heteropatriarchs. So this cultural conflict is no mere misunderstanding, and the stakes could not be higher. As they say, we're in a fraught moment where we need all the friends and allies we can possibly gather, as Dale so brilliantly has gathered us.
Thank you, Dr. Ellison, for your sobering comments. Expect the crazy. Wow. Wow. Well, I'd like to turn to Dr. Bass now. Dr. Bass, you have made a career as a sexual health professional. Just how smart are folks in the U.S. about sexuality? You're coming behind Dr. Ellison here. And what are the most common problems they are encountering that you see in your work? And how does religion help or hurt those folks? Dr. Bass.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Hey, Kim. I'm in Durham. Um, I appreciate being here, and hopefully you can hear me. And thinking about what Sheree and I think Sheree and Marvin just offered, and thinking about the response that I had, I wanted to offer up like a perspective that I have in addition to the answer that I was coming up with, is that I grew up in a Christian faith where it was often recited and stated that we perish, or the people perish, because of a lack of knowledge, and that it was important to understand that knowledge would be power, but it's oftentimes we know better than we do, because there's certain things that we know, like flossing our teeth, right, is going to help us maintain dental health. But if I were to ask everyone on the call, how many of you flossed your teeth today? Probably only 2 or 3 of you might raise your hand. I'd be impressed if all of you raised your hand. And so when I think about what people know, I think we're in a space now. Cherie, your comment made me think back to my social studies class and thinking about power. There were so many things I didn't know in my 9th grade social studies course that when my teacher approached me, and he did something so simple, you all, as placing his finger with chalk on my nose and going down my nose. I was a Black student, a transplant, right, from Brooklyn, New York. There were so many feelings that I had inside that for knowledge, I didn't understand what was happening in the moment. And I couldn't understand why, out of all the students, majority white students in particular, that he chose me to be the one to say I was cute as a puppy dog. Like, what did that even mean? And was that even a compliment? And it didn't feel like a compliment, right? And it was gross and disgusting. And as I think about growing into knowledge, I then realized that I was subject to a power dynamic that I had no control over as a 9th grade student. And now as I think about what I learned from my health and PE teachers there, I believe that people know more than they do. I think we have opportunity to learn things about sex, sexuality, and our faith intersecting than we ever have, at least in my time here on earth. But I do believe we are challenged with the myths that are out there. We're combating people who aren't necessarily looking, they're able to take and twist or manipulate facts into fear. And that's to me been the challenge since my youth up until today. And that's what we have to combat. But I believe in my whole heart, at least in my personal experience, that faith and teachings around faith are the spaces where we get the answer, where we get the freedom. I believe that shame and erotophobia I'll use my own Christian vernacular from today. We had a deliverance service, that we can be delivered and set free and liberated through our own faith language and text and documents and history, if we look at it with an eye through sexual liberation and sexual understanding versus a lens of shame, condemnation, and oppression. I hope that makes sense to you all. I remember meeting you, Reverend Dale, at not Quades, but a Woodhall conference, and I had on my public health is racism, is a problem for racism, and we talked about like how different aspects of our individual identities impact our ability to access and understand and be liberated in sexuality. Those are the type of barriers that we're dealing with. And those are the things that I believe we can change. And I believe that we can use the tools such as social media, and to Sheree's point, being available and in classes to be liberated ourselves so we can teach sexual liberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bass. Bring on the deliverance ministries. So I have a question now for our entire panel. So where are we going, and what do you think we need for the journey? That's my first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, what metaphor best describes this reality and our future together?
Good evening. I can go, Angela, first. I also want to apologize that I am in transition, so I don't know where I am, but it's a well-lit, safe area in Durham, North Carolina. um, the metaphor that came to mind is an African proverb of when spider webs unite, they can tangle a lion. And the reason that stuck out for me is more and more in my work, whether it's my faith opportunities or through professional connections and sexuality, is that I'm meeting more people. Not to assume we all are in the same worldview, but I believe if we get to that common thread, that we can be able to turn the course around sexuality and the connection with faith. So that's why I chose that African proverb: when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. That's my metaphor.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
When you're talking about one of the things, what do we need? I feel like Marv Ellison might be better poised to answer this question, but I'm gonna offer one thought. And I take this from the therapeutic world. When you're in therapy, one of the things that the therapist, I think, hopes to curate or cultivate in a person is what I would say, a good curiosity about one's own life, which is the gentle way of exploration about, well, why do I think these things, and where did it come from? And and I think I think what we need is a gentle curiosity about our own sexual selves, to cultivate that more widely could lead to some very significant changes.
So let me just follow those two very good responses with just a couple of things. As I've thought about where we're going, I think for me, the answer to that question, where are we going, depends so much on where and how we choose to show up and with whom. I think Dale has understood better than most that spirituality, when all is said and done, is about desire. What kind of world do we desire to inhabit? And with whom do we desire to share that world? And I think what Dale knows as well is there's great moral wisdom for the journey that can be found in the sciences, in Christian and other faith traditions, and from social justice movements, but only as these sources of knowledge are critically filtered through a feminist, queer, and anti-racist lens. But I think, above all, what Dale has encouraged us to do is to be the change we most desire, challenging us to embody what I call an ethical eroticism, and to show deep respect for our bodies, for other kinds of bodies, for the body politic, and for the earth itself. And what Dale insists on over and over again, which I'm so grateful for, is this is sacred work. And when we take up this sacred work, of embodying an ethical eroticism, what we stand to discover, it's a kind of surprise as well as a delight, is some really good news that our spiritual well-being and our moral integrity depend on our settling for nothing less than our divine birthright, claiming for each other without any exceptions, and claiming for the earth itself a full, overflowing measure of both justice and joy. That if we're listening and responding to this good news, it offers us both justice and joy. And I'm just really grateful Dale has been such a tireless and fierce advocate for both good principles and deep pleasure, holy principles, sacred pleasure, which is about the best bread for the journey I can imagine. So I just want to say again a word of gratitude to Dale and to the community that Dale has worked so hard to gather, which I think in so many ways exemplifies how we need to get over the Christian craziness and the Christian moral panic about the erotic, because the erotic is an indispensable moral power. It is nothing less than our capacity to love and be loved in and through our bodies. And that is a blessing.
Thank you for that. Cherie, any comments?
It's hard to top that. I will say, as my fellow panelists were talking, some words from Rev Bev that came to mind that rocked my world when she and I began our relationship was describing, in terms of how we understand ethics, as specifically sexual health ethics, is she describes us as morally autonomous beings bound by community. And that has really stuck with me as far as I've untangled some of my own beliefs that I was raised under. And I think it is community and empathy that is what we can bring along on this journey, that helps people. Speaking from my personal experience as a teacher of young people, I am knocking on wood right now, but I have not had any serious conflicts with any parents that are concerned about the level of education that I am teaching them, their children. But I have thought about what I would say if I did, and it is a empathy or a connection with a parent. When I think about parents that are terrified of sex education, when I think about parents that are watching perhaps Fox News and are terrified of transgender people, are terrified of drag queens, there is a level of empathy that I have, because imagine the fear that you would have as a parent if you believed those things, if you believed that this was dangerous. And the community that I have, or the empathy that I have with this hypothetical parent that I have not had to deal with yet, is I understand that you are scared and that you want your kid to be safe, and that is what I want as well, and that is why I'm here. That's obviously niche, but I think explaining alternative paths for people as all being potentially ethical and potentially healthy, when so many of us raised in religions communities are told that one specific path is what is healthy and ethical. Explaining this like multi-path life is daunting and scary and unsettling to some people, liberating and exciting and joyous for others. But if we frame it, as Rev Bev says, as morally autonomous beings bound by community, if it violates someone's ability to enjoy community, then it is not moral, then it is not ethical. That has really shaped and rocked my world as far as like how to do this work and where we're going. So we'll end on that. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you all for participating in this incredibly enlightening panel discussion. Thank you for providing your wisdom, providing your insights into both our current state and the promising trajectory ahead, even if we should expect the crazies, Dr. Ellison. So now it is with great honor and enthusiasm that I introduce our visionary founder, Reverend Dr. Beverly Dale. Rev Bev, as I call her, liberated herself from the constraints and mistreatment of her small town conservative upbringing, embarked on a journey of education and service with a background as a pastor with the Disciples of Christ and a campus minister at the University of Pennsylvania. She harnessed the wisdom gained from these diverse experiences to conceive one of the most cutting-edge, radical, and thought-provoking nonprofit organizations in existence. Rev Bev's commitment to pushing boundaries is evident not only in her leadership, but also in her scholarly contributions. She co-authored the groundbreaking work, Advancing Sexual Health for the Christian Client, Data and Dogma, alongside sex therapists and our testimonial trainee, Rachel Keller, this evening. This pioneering resource seamlessly blends the science of human sexuality with a body-positive Christian framework, challenging and reshaping the discourse in the field. So please join me in welcoming the visionary behind our organization, Rev Bev, as she shares her remarkable journey and insights and what's next for her. Rev Bev, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been humbling, I must say, to hear this lovely affirmations of this work. And I thought that the panel and even the testimonials would get our heads all stirred up, that you did not need a long speech from me. So I'm just going to speak just a little bit about what brings us here to this time and place, and a little bit about where I'm headed. So I have spent most of my working career after I was a housewife for a number of years. But most of the time has been administration of various nonprofit organizations. And I don't even do that well. The first job was to provide services that would keep the elderly in their homes rather than having them be forced to move to a nursing home. And another administrative position was to serve as the manager of a 27,000 square foot piece of property in the heart of the campus of UPenn. And in between time, I would try to find time to do some campus ministry. But I'm not particularly good at administration. It's not where my heart is, in other words. Let me get my thoughts together here. Okay. So in both of these positions, I prefer dreaming the dreams, envisioning what's possible, moving people or inspiring people toward their common vision, instead of board meetings and oversight of financial operations and legal obligations and staff supervision. Okay. So 1982, I went to seminary with a vague career plan to teach the church good things about sexuality after I was an ordained clergy. I had just come off a master's in sociology, but focusing on sexuality. So I was ready to apply this to the church. How naive was that? But 10 years ago, things started a little bit differently. And I realized that course, there's no such job, but I still felt a call. So religion is at the heart of the message of God in the flesh. That's the Christian message. I thought, we should really have some good news about humanity in the flesh too. It's real simple. So that year, I began hosting fundraisers and talking to people about my call, and the Incarnation Institute was born in 2013. So my focus, however, here comes the disclaimer, was not on administration, but on program. So in 2016, I initiated the prototype training program for clergy and sexual health professionals. And some of those folks are here who were in that. And then 2019, with the assistance of my IISF trainee and board member therapist, Rachel Keller, we wrote the textbook that we began using. And with the help of Reverend Dr. Lisette Cross, who was a board member and a trainee and a womanist, dedicated to the sexual and mental health well-being for women of color particularly, we developed and honed the training program for levels 1 and 2. And we've now trained 3 other trainers, and we have 3 more on the docket coming in to be trained soon. But they are Priscilla Tennant and Onika Henry and Desiree Robinson. So to date, we have trained 58 people. They have finished and completed level 1 training. Some of them did this for their own benefit. Some of them are using it in work, and some of them want to stay and do more training with us. So the biggest compliment for me is to hear how this training has changed their lives. Over and over, we hear how trainees come for the training and to get some tools professionally, and then only to discover that it has impacted them personally and transformed their understanding of faith, their relationship to Christianity, and sometimes shifted their focus on their career. And for others, it brings closure and healing. We hear from clergy who are pastoring in the far country, feeling alone and isolated in conservative, erotophobic areas, who say to us, "At last, I have found my people. I thought I was the only one who thought like this." We hear therapists and counselors grateful that they have some tools now. And the exciting thing is they are ready. They feel prepared now and courageous. And they're going to go back and name the dis-ease of their clients, this elephant in the room that is sex-phobic religion that's causing so much heartache and suffering for individuals, but also couples. Now, this week, I met someone who is developing a new organization. And unlike me, she's thinking strategically. I did not. I just responded to what I thought was a call from God. So she's thinking how to focus on who can subsidize her organization and how to pitch it to them. I did not. I just had a vision. I have made a career in administration of nonprofits, but though I don't do it that well, I'm admitting my deficiencies. I'm a dreamer, and I'm not much of an architect. And we need architectural skills to provide a solid foundation to sustain this work, even as we continue to dream and as I step aside. So, dreaming. Imagine holding more level 1 trainings in the future every year and adding new programming for lay people, branching out to people who are not in the professional worlds of theology or sexual health. And for those who have left the church behind as they seek healing. Imagine building a strong and visible sex and faith positive movement that can critique what's happening politically and culturally and offer a different and loud voice as body positive people of faith. Imagine this vibrant sex and faith movement of trained professionals who can not only heal the sexually wounded, but also educate the culture at large. And a movement that talks back to the politicians who rely on faulty science and bigoted Bible readings. Imagine infiltrating seminary training, using multiple paid seminary internships every year, whom the IISF would train, and then they would get the message out to the younger generation or their their cohorts in the seminaries and lead to a generation of clergy who are empowered with a body positive message of incarnation. Imagine a paid staff position to build IISF partnerships with organizations who are already working on sexual justice, but few have partnerships with religious organizations. And those who are already working for racial justice, but have few partnerships with sexual justice organizations. It's all about the intersections. And this is kind of where it all comes together with the bodies and body justice. Imagine all of this. So I followed a call, and it was a vision and it was a dream. And we are now 10 years down the line, and we have the skeleton of the work. The programming is in place. We have an enthusiastic and loyal interim leadership team. We have a core group of trainees who want more programming, more training, more solidarity and community. And we have trainers ready to do this work. So how do we grow this work? How does the sex and faith movement get mobilized and begin pushing back against a sex-negative church and culture? It's not my call. I'm getting old. Building architecture is not my best skill. I'm clear that my job was to hold the vision and to show it can be done. It is being done. But others have better skills and can take it from here. My job was to get it all started, and that I have done. So now it's time for me to step aside and do what I do best: teaching, writing, inspiring, holding the vision of our beautiful and blessed bodies that are made in the image of goodness itself. I'm excited about what's coming down the pike for me. I have a book coming out that will help as tools called 2025 by Pilgrim Press. It's called Who Told You That You Were Naked? Meditations on the Sexual Body. This is for people who have been beaten by the culture and the sex negative church. Tools that will help them heal. I'm working on another one now called Sin Boldly, a path to sexual wholeness. So I have things to do. The administration is not my gift, so I'm stepping aside. I'm going nowhere. I'll still be here, but I hope you would join us in being architects for where we take this. I have discovered that when we follow the vision and we get good people in the same room together, we meet wonderful people with gifts, and good things always happen. So I'm stepping aside, and just know that I have been blessed. Thank you very much.
Woo!
Rev Bev, your words have been truly inspiring, and we express our heartfelt gratitude for your remarkable service, for answering the call, for your unwavering commitment to creating this liberating space. We just honor you today for your vision. And for those of you who are inspired to contribute and further Rev Bev's legacy, there are various ways to get involved. We've established a legacy fund. We have a goal of $20,000 by the end of the year, and that is going to be matched dollar for dollar up to $10,000 if you make a donation before the end of the year. I believe someone is putting in the chat for me the PayPal link for our legacy fund, as well as for our Cash App. That's also being placed in the chat if you'd like to make a donation. You can also find out more information about this legacy fund on our website under Transition to the Future. That link is also being placed in the chat. We're also looking for good board members, y'all. So if you have a skill set, marketing, PR, fundraising, program, and if you want to join us as a board, please reach out to us. And if you're interested in our training programs, information can be found also on our website. Our next level 1 training is scheduled to run from February 27th to April 16th, 2024. Again, that's February 27th through April 16th, 2024. It's virtual. It'll take place on Tuesday evenings from 7 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and applications open on January 2nd. Additionally, we invite you to join our Science and Religion series titled What to Do When Religious Beliefs Are Inconsistent with Science, where we explore topics such as gender diversity and gender roles. We'll do that on Tuesday, January 9th at noon Eastern. Homosexuality on January 30th at noon Eastern. And we'll explore pleasure on February 6th at noon Eastern. And oh, before I forget, we've just received a grant focusing specifically on polyamory. And you will find more details about that grant if you're interested in polyamory. That will be available in January. So if you sign up for our newsletter, you can stay informed of what's happening in that space as well. So with that, we bring this farewell gala to a close. Thank you all for spending your evening with us, and we look forward to reconnecting with you soon. Thank you.